You cannot make this up. But Alexander Dighton had given up on life. He had had enough. And in order to ensure that he would be jailed for most of his adult life, Alexander decided to take out his pent-up frustration, his anger, and his angst and resentment out on the police force. Now, Alexander went there with the main aim of trying to K them. Now, Alexander went out looking to make national headlines as one last hurrah. The Welshman, who is from Rhondda area, had mixed a batch of Molotov cocktails. He then put them in his bag. He poured a canister of petrol. He had also taken with him a long pole and a hatchet and also a blade. Now, before leaving his home, Alexander Dighton also donned on body armour. Now, once the madman had riled himself up, combed his beard, shouted in the mirror his war cry, and then told himself this is really it, he then left his house on January 31st of this year. Now, Alexander was shaking with rage. He then travelled to the Talbot Green police station in South Wales. Now, Alexander knew that his actions were going to be recorded. After all, this was a police station, an active one. He knew that inside the police station were open and functioning police officers. So it's reasonable to assume that Alexander, as I said before, was either looking to K a police officer or police officers, plural, or he was going to antagonise them into causing him harm. Now, according to reports, Alexander set up a chain of events that would lead to an attempted M, among other charges. Now, first of all, Alexander got his wooden pole and used it to break out the windows of police cars and police vans just before 7 p.m. Now, once the van windows were put in, then another one, and then another one, and then another one was broken. Then the 28-year-old Alexander took out a Molotov and then chucked it at the bonnet of a police van. It was just by sheer luck that the van did not engulf in red-hot flames. Now, annoyed, Alexander then retrieved the petrol and then doused a second police van in the liquid before setting it alight. And then he also set flames beneath the vehicle and just watched it grow and grow and grow. Police were alerted by the sounds of alarms and, of course, the brazen and outlandish crime being recorded on the police CCTV cameras. Also, Alexander was said to be shouting while he was committing these crimes. Now, first of all, PC Stephanie Fleming was the first police officer to make contact with Alexander when she came marching out of the Talbot Green police station. Now, she approached with caution and then asked Alexander what the hell he thought he was doing and also to drop his items. Alexander grimaced and explained, "I'm fed up, I'm done with this, I'm done with it all." And his actions were clear. Police officer Stephanie Fleming then unclipped her tee and then pointed it straight at Alexander to the chest area. The order was given to get on the ground and again drop his items. This was the final order. Not deterred or fazed in the slightest, it goes without saying, but Alexander declined the final order. He flat out and completely ignored it. Now, when the woman officer deployed her tee, it struck Alexander, but it had zero effect on him. His movements weren't restricted, there was no voltage going throughout his body, and he did not slow down at all. Rather, Alexander marched forward to the foyer of the police station. The guy actually made it to the foyer. His intent now on police officers instead of police equipment and police-issued vehicles. Peed off and fuming, Alexander had the impurest intent to K police officers now, and his first target was Sergeant Richard Coleman. As Alexander launched his hulking frame at the Sergeant Richard Coleman, he used his parva, but still, Alexander did not slow down. Still clutching the wooden pole, Alexander swung the pole like a madman possessed, up and over and under, sideways to the left and sideways to the right, and then Alexander struck Sergeant Richard Coleman around the side of his head, knocking the police officer off balance, and of course red was leaking. And when Detective Constable Joshua Emlyn tried to subdue Alexander, Alexander Dighton bore the hand into a fist and then swung full power, and he connected with Joshua's head. At this point, all three police officers, whom were bruised, swollen, dazed, and also leaking red, tried to come together and restrain Alexander, but Alexander pulled out a blade and then he started to swing indiscriminately, and he first bladed Detectable Constable Jack Cotton in the leg, leaving a puncture wound. When Alexander was finally restrained, police officers searched him and they found that again Alexander Dighton was wearing body armour and he was also carrying a hatchet in the bag, which could have led to devastating consequences. Now, when he was placed in handcuffs and arrested, Alexander says, "I've been damned from birth." Police obviously went to his home next after the arrest, and inside the home they found journals that contained ideologies around a return to traditional society. In layman's terms, he had his idea of what Britain should look like, and of course Wales. Now, Alexander was arrested, as I said, and he was charged with 6 other offences, after 3 officers in total were injured at the Talbot Green police station. 2 of them were taken to hospital and treated for their injuries. Now, at the Old Bailey, Alexander admitted attempted arson, attacking 2 police officers, and also making promises to kill a third, and he pled guilty to a total of the 10 charges. And he also refused the help of a lawyer, saying previously that he did not think the profession of being a solicitor or a lawyer was a respectable one. Now, when Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb suggested that Alexander had a problem with authority, Alexander remarked, "Authority is not my problem, but the use of authority that I have seen since I was 15, that is my problem." Because the police and the prosecution and the judge could not understand what would drive a man to go to a police station and try to kill officers, a psychiatric report was issued, and in the report it found that Alexander was sound of mind and fit to plead to the charges. And in court, Alexander had the great idea to represent himself, and of course his family tried to help him. Now, his sister says that Alexander was a vulnerable person. She also said that he had left a concerning note and had wiped his history on his laptop. She also commented that he was a wonderful, kind, quirky guy. Now, Alexander has been put on remand, and his next hearing is on May 13th, where the judge will have to determine whether this incident was isolated or the motivation behind it could be related to a T. And of course, when he is ultimately sentenced, he is looking at a long, long time behind bars. There's no way that an angry civilian can arm themselves with a blade, hatchet, and wooden pole, don on body armour, make their way to a police station, try to engulf the police vehicles in flames, and then injure not 1, not 2, but 3 officers and also blade one, and then think you are coming out of this unscathed or without serving double digits. If he does not get a life sentence, then I will be surprised. Stay safe.